The Indiana Fever just finalized their 2026 roster, and Caitlin Clark fans are furious right now. And honestly, they believe they have every reason to be. The frustration comes down to one major issue that showed up in every single preseason game. Indiana still does not have enough floor spacing from the forward positions. Fans thought the front office would fix that problem before the roster became official. Instead, the Fever used their final roster spot on another guard, while 6'4" sharpshooter Justine Passat, a player many fans believe perfectly fits this team, ended up on a developmental contract while reportedly dealing with an injury situation that has already sparked controversy. And now people are seriously asking, is Indiana actually building a championship roster, or are they making decisions that work against their own stars? Fans online have been brutal. Some are calling the front office incompetent. Others are blaming head coach Stephanie White. But underneath all the emotion is a basketball concern that keeps showing up over and over again. In all three preseason games, opposing teams used basically the exact same defensive strategy against Indiana. The New York Liberty did it, the Dallas Wings did it, even the Nigerian national team did it. Every opponent packed the paint, ignored Indiana's forwards on the perimeter, and dared them to shoot from outside. And it worked. Why? Because most of Indiana's front court players are traditional bigs who are not respected as perimeter shooters. Aaliyah Boston, Misha Hines-Allen, Monique Billings, Michaela Timpson, and others are strong interior players, but defenders do not fear them standing behind the three-point line. So defenses collapse into the lane, clog every driving gap, and wait for Caitlin Clark or Boston to attack into traffic. That creates a domino effect throughout the offense. Clark tries to drive and runs directly into multiple defenders because the paint is crowded before the possession even develops. Boston gets the ball in the post and immediately faces double teams because defenders know they can safely leave Indiana's forwards open on the outside. The offense becomes cramped, predictable, and much easier to defend. The Dallas game exposed another major problem connected to spacing: rebounding. Dallas dominated Indiana on the glass by 19 rebounds. When multiple non-shooting bigs are packed into the same area near the basket, everybody is fighting for position in a crowded paint. The lack of spacing doesn't just hurt offense, it hurts rebounding structure too. Stephanie White even admitted after the game that Indiana got out-toughed and outplayed physically. The Fever also committed 17 turnovers, and Dallas turned those mistakes into constant trips to the free throw line. Fans argue this is not simply an effort issue. They believe it's a roster construction issue. Modern basketball, including the WNBA, increasingly depends on spacing. Teams need forwards who can stretch defenses and force defenders away from the paint. Without that, elite guards like Caitlin Clark have less room to operate. And then came the Nigeria game, which showed fans exactly why they are so frustrated. DeWanna Bonner? No. Kelsey Mitchell? No. It was Dayona Dantas stepping out and hitting 4 threes that suddenly changed the geometry of the offense. The moment Indiana had a forward consistently making outside shots, driving lanes opened up. Defenders had to step out. The floor finally looked balanced. That is why so many fans believe the Fever already had the answer sitting on their roster in Justine Passat. Passat is 6'4" with a 7-foot wingspan and shot over 42% from three-point range at Vanderbilt on high volume. She was considered one of the purest shooters in her draft class. She is exactly the type of stretch forward modern offenses need. And during the Liberty preseason game, she showed flashes immediately. In only 10 minutes, she scored 8 points and knocked down 2 threes against one of the best teams in the league. Aaliyah Boston even commented afterward about how much a shooting post changes the offense because defenses are forced to respect the perimeter. Fans saw it instantly, so when Indiana placed Passat on a developmental contract instead of giving her a guaranteed roster spot, outrage exploded online. Meanwhile, the Fever kept another small guard on the roster, creating what many fans believe is an unnecessary guard overload. The roster now features multiple guards who all need touches and ball handling opportunities. Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hull, Ty Harris, Raven Johnson, Shatori Walker-Kimbrough supporters argue the issue is not talent. Indiana absolutely has talented players. Clark and Boston could become one of the league's best star duos. Mitchell remains an elite scorer. Hull brings defense and movement. Cunningham adds toughness and shooting. Raven Johnson showed impressive defensive instincts and transition playmaking during preseason. The problem, according to fans, is fit. The roster asks Clark to thrive in transition while surrounding her with lineups that do not consistently create space. At the same time, Stephanie White has openly discussed wanting Clark to play more off the ball, similar to how the Golden State Warriors use Steph Curry. White's idea is to make Clark part of the second or third action in a possession instead of having her initiate everything. But Clark herself pushed back on that idea publicly. She said she believes she is the best transition player in the league and emphasized that her game thrives when she grabs the ball early and attacks before defenses are set. That difference in philosophy has become another major talking point among fans. Clark appears to view off-ball movement as one weapon in her game. White appears to want it as a larger offensive foundation, and fans argue that off-ball systems only work properly when the floor is spaced well enough to create movement opportunities. If defenders can ignore Indiana's forwards, then Clark running off screens becomes much easier to defend. So now many supporters feel trapped between two conflicting realities. Clark wants pace and space. White wants structure and half-court actions. The roster currently does not fully support either system. Then the situation became even more controversial when reports surfaced that Pissot was injured. Fans immediately became suspicious because the details around the injury felt vague. Then Pissot herself posted online telling people not to believe everything being reported. That one statement fueled even more speculation. Some fans now believe Indiana is intentionally hiding Pissot on a developmental contract to avoid committing a full roster spot while still maintaining control of her rights. Others fear the Fever could eventually lose her entirely because another team could easily offer her a guaranteed contract. And teams around the league are definitely paying attention. A 6'4" forward with elite shooting ability and a 7-foot wingspan is not a common player archetype. Stretch forwards with size are incredibly valuable in modern basketball. That is why fans keep repeating the same thing. One true stretch four could solve most of Indiana's offensive problems immediately. A floor spacing forward would open driving lanes for Clark, reduce double teams on Boston, improve offensive flow, create cleaner perimeter shots, balance the floor in transition, improve rebounding positioning, and because of that, many fans believe the Fever are wasting a championship-level opportunity. The talent is clearly there. Indiana even beat the Liberty by 18 points during preseason despite missing important players. The team forced turnovers, played fast, and looked explosive when things clicked. But supporters fear the current roster structure could hold everything back before the season even truly begins. Now the pressure is fully on the Fever front office, because if Justine Pissot develops somewhere else while Indiana continues struggling with spacing all season, fans will never forget this decision. What makes this entire situation even more explosive is that the Fever are no longer operating under rebuilding expectations. That phase is over. The second Caitlin Clark walked into the franchise, expectations changed overnight. Ticket prices exploded. National television coverage exploded. Social media engagement exploded. Every single Fever game suddenly became one of the biggest events in women's basketball. And with that attention came pressure. Not, maybe compete in a few years pressure. Championship pressure. That is why fans are reacting so emotionally to every roster decision now. They are not looking at Indiana like a rebuilding team anymore. They are looking at them like a contender that cannot afford obvious mistakes. And to many fans, the spacing issue feels obvious. The preseason games did not expose some tiny weakness hidden deep inside advanced analytics. It was visible to everybody watching. The paint looked crowded constantly. Clark repeatedly drove into traffic. Boston repeatedly caught the ball surrounded by defenders. Possessions stalled because nobody could consistently pull shot blockers away from the rim. And fans are frustrated because they believe the Fever already had the exact type of player modern basketball demands sitting right there in Justine Pissot. The anger intensified because this is not just about one rookie anymore. It is about a larger fear that Indiana may still be thinking about basketball in an outdated way while the rest of the league evolves around them. The WNBA today is becoming more and more spacing-oriented every season. Bigs are stretching the floor, forwards are shooting threes, centers are passing from the perimeter. Transition offenses are becoming faster. Teams are prioritizing versatility and switchability defensively. The old model of stacking multiple non-shooting bigs together is disappearing because elite guards are simply too dangerous when they have space. And nobody punishes space better than Caitlin Clark. That is why so many people keep bringing up the comparison to Steph Curry. Not because Clark and Curry are identical players, but because both players bend defenses in extreme ways the moment they cross half court. The problem is that Curry's movement works because Golden State historically surrounded him with spacing, shooting, and intelligent off-ball movement. Draymond Green could facilitate. Klay Thompson stretched defenses. Kevin Durant stretched defenses. Andrew Wiggins could slash into open space. Even role players understood spacing principles. Everything connected together. Fans are worried Indiana does not currently have that same ecosystem around Clark. Instead, they fear the Fever are trying to force a motion-heavy offense without first solving the spacing foundation required to make it function. That concern became even louder after Stephanie White's comments about using Clark off the ball more frequently. because fans immediately started asking the same question. Who exactly is creating the advantage if Clark does not initiate? Clark is one of the best live dribble creators in basketball already. Her ability to manipulate defenders before the defense fully sets is arguably her greatest weapon. She sees passing lanes before they open. She throws transition passes most players would never even attempt. And her deep shooting range forces defenders to panic the moment she crosses half court. Taking the ball out of her hands too often risks neutralizing the very thing that makes her special. Now, to be fair, White's idea is not completely unreasonable. Using Clark off the ball can absolutely create chaos for defenses. Defenders hate chasing elite shooters through screens because it forces constant communication and movement. Even a split-second mistake can lead to an open three. Clark herself acknowledged that reality by referencing Steph Curry's movement style. But there is a massive difference between using off-ball movement as a change-up and making it the core identity of the offense. Fans believe Clark wants balance. White appears to want structure. And when the roster lacks spacing, those philosophies start colliding instead of complementing each other. The Fever's preseason possessions often looked confused because of that tension. Sometimes Clark pushed the pace immediately and Indiana looked dangerous. Other times the team slowed into half-court actions where spacing disappeared and everybody seemed cramped together. The offense would suddenly lose rhythm. That inconsistency is what scares fans most because championship teams usually know exactly who they are. Right now, Indiana still looks like a team searching for its identity. And that uncertainty becomes even riskier when you remember how competitive the WNBA has become. The New York Liberty are loaded, the Las Vegas Aces still have championship experience. The Connecticut Sun remain disciplined defensively. Dallas has size and athleticism. Phoenix added more firepower. Even younger teams are improving quickly. There are no easy nights anymore. If Indiana enters the season with obvious spacing flaws, opposing coaches will attack that weakness relentlessly until the Fever prove they can punish it. And the preseason already gave everybody the blueprint. Collapse the paint, force Clark into crowds, double Boston immediately, ignore non-shooting forwards, dare Indiana to beat you from outside. That strategy will continue until Indiana proves otherwise. Which brings the conversation back to Justine Pissot yet again. Because fans cannot understand why a player who theoretically solves so many structural problems is not guaranteed a full roster spot. Her skill set fits almost perfectly next to Clark in Boston. Clark creates gravity with the ball. Boston commands attention inside. Pissot stretches defenses outward. That triangle alone makes basketball sense immediately, and the numbers back it up too. At Vanderbilt, Pissot was not just a casual shooter taking open looks once in a while. She was a high-volume perimeter threat who defenders genuinely feared. Shooting over 42% from three on more than 6 attempts per game is elite efficiency at any